As fun of a Stanley Cup Final Rematch that you could ask for as the Florida Panthers go into Edmonton without Barkov. Some familiar faces from the Cup run got going, and some others, newcomers for the Panthers that you wouldn't expect, helped make the difference in a comeback regulation win.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, December 17th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers and on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. No underscore there. And today's episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. The College Football Playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The College Football Playoff, presented by Allstate, begins with 4 first-round games, December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. So, Florida Panther fans, grateful to be back here on the show once again to talk everything in the world of the Cats. And I came into this day, I woke up with a lot of energy, obviously, with the Stanley Cup Final Rematch for the Panthers, but also reliving some of the memories that we all made together with the Florida Panthers clinching their first ever Stanley Cup Final win against these very same Edmonton Oilers that just a few months ago on June 24th, 2024, a game and a day that a lot of us would never forget in our lives. And of course, what happened after the parade, the economic impact that came out with what's happened in the last 2 years, the lease agreement, the extension, and now for the Panthers just continuing on, and then also the core memories were created across South Florida and beyond for them. But with the Panthers going into this matchup, the Edmonton Oilers on the other side of things felt the same feelings that the Florida Panthers were feeling just last year when they faced off against the Vegas Golden Knights. Just a lot of bitterness, a lot of, when you see the logo on the other side, you get a little angry about it because that's the team, as Matthew Tkachuk said, stole your dream of your ultimate goal. But even with this one, the Panthers going into this one without Alexander Barkov once again due to illness, and the Panthers really, it's crazy what they set the tone early with having the Edmonton Oilers go in circles, having forwards up at the blue line to create disruption, and having the Edmonton Oilers having a hard time getting into the zone. Crazy turn of events with the Panthers taking a penalty, scoring that shorthanded goal by Jesper Boqvist, which is his first career shorthanded goal for him, and all of his goals have been in the first period this year. The Panthers equal it up at 4-on-4 with the trip by Evan Bouchard, which Evan Bouchard did not have a great game for the Edmonton Oilers for him. And just like Game 7, they scored first and then gave one up on a breakaway to Zach Hyman, a drop pass by Draisaitl, and then causes the Cats to freeze, and then Mikkola leaves Hyman all open on the left side of the zone for him, and then it didn't feel at times that even with the game was tied, it was going to be their night, because their first power play until the last 11 seconds was a disaster for them, for the Panthers. And thankfully they got that double minor with Darnell Nurse drawing at the referee and putting a little bit of mustard on his penalty call, and the Panthers getting that goal in the final 11 seconds, and those final 30 seconds were all about faster with puck retrievals, and then Matthew Tkachuk being in his office to score with 11 seconds to go on that power play, and then going over into the second period with a lead of 2-1, and then carrying that over a bit in the second. But the Panthers at some point going 10 minutes without a shot on goal, and then 3 goals in 3 minutes and 4 seconds. You get Ekblad and Forsling a little crossed up, where McDavid chips it up to Zach Hyman, and then finishing out on breakaway. And then Zach Hyman, to think that he almost had a hat trick in this one, which we'll get to a little bit later, taking a shot off the nose, going into the locker room, came back with a shield for him. And then also the Panthers, a little bit of a poor breakup by Niko Mikkola that ended up in the back of the net, which is a goal that maybe Sergei Bobrovsky could have saved on his blocker on the short side. But there's been goals that have been squeaking by the Panthers goaltenders lately. And also the very next one where the Edmonton Oilers were on the power play, and then they get the puck to Leon Draisaitl. He one times it, and then Sergei Bobrovsky is a little late to his left side post, and it gets past the glove for him. But we saw some signs of the Panthers taking a little bit of control in this one, where the fourth line was getting it deep, forechecking, getting a chance to get it back high, D getting involved with throwing the pucks on net faster to the retrievals, and then the Panthers were able to get a change off that as well. With once the Lundell line got it back to Forsling, the shot off from the point got off of Stuart Skinner, off of Emberson, and then into the net for them. And then one hit near the Panthers bench from Jonah Gadjovich that really changed a lot of things for the Panthers. The Edmonton Oilers were going after that fourth line near the benches. Evan Bouchard didn't have any puck support when he was trying to break out that pass, and then Eetu Luostarinen goes on the forecheck, and then Lundell sets up Niko Mikkola, which Niko Mikkola, 5 goals against the Edmonton Oilers in the last 2 seasons, including the postseason, scoring in all 4 regular season games, and what that very epic goal in Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final that really made the difference for the Panthers in that game. And for the Panthers, later on in that period, great individual effort by Sam Reinhart when the Edmonton Oilers were trying to get it low to high, and Sam Reinhart pinned on the end boards, wins the race to the puck in the neutral zone, and then goes to the goal line and then shoots it off of Stuart Skinner's mask and into the net for the Panthers to give him the lead at the time. And we saw that the Leon Draisaitl was pulling away with the goal drought, and then Sam Reinhart saying, "No, I haven't scored a goal in the last 4 games. Let me get involved in the scoring and still give me a chance to get in on the Rocket Richard race for him." Even though Leon Draisaitl, what he's done this season, we spoke about it with Nick Zararis about the defensive impact of his game. But Leon Draisaitl, we didn't mention this, is scoring a whole bunch of his goals at even strength. Not a lot of them on the power play, and the fact that he hasn't means that he's probably going to go on a tear sometime soon. And although Edmonton scored again 39 seconds later off a weird bounce off the end boards, Captain Clutch, Carter Verhaeghe, gets his 9th of the season. 2 of the guys with the worst puck luck in the NHL, Zach Hyman and Carter Verhaeghe, they scored 3 of the 11 goals for these 2 teams for them. But Niko Mikkola with a really aggressive pinch for the Panthers. He saw that Connor McDavid was going up the zone, not seeing that Niko Mikkola was coming up, gets it to Sam Bennett in open ice near the corner, and then gets it back to the middle for Carter Verhaeghe, sees that Matthias Ekholm is screening Stuart Skinner. And then this is something that Randy Moeller even spoke about on the broadcast. Stuart Skinner kept going low constantly. He was anticipating pucks were going through his 5-hole. So what were the Panthers doing? They adjusted. They went high on Stuart Skinner, which ended up being that game winner for the Panthers. For them, top 2 lines were getting in on the attack and had Edmonton really in a turnstile, really a lot through this through the last few minutes of the game. D was defending in transition, allowing the forwards to come in on their back check. And I mean, for the Panthers, it was really when guys are going up in the lineup, you can't really replace a guy like Sasha Barkov in the lineup. I know they're 6-3-1 in the 10 games that he's missed, but I mean the fact that the Panthers see the Edmonton Oilers on the other side, a team that they faced in the final, it was one that the Panthers we should have expected for them to get up for a game like this one, and just for the Panthers that. Them getting up for this one and then making up those goals, 6 of them after not scoring a single one in the last 2. Sometimes hockey is just like that for certain teams. They are very familiar with certain places, as now the Panthers are 7-0-3 in their last 10 regular season matchups in Edmonton, which goes back to 2015. Yager scored one of the goals in the 2015 matchup. The one of the regulation losses for overtime losses for the Panthers was the one that ended their 12-game winning streak back in 2016 for them. Sergei Bobrovsky recently got a shutout there in Edmonton. He's now won 6 straight on the road there, which is a really tough barn to play. I mean, you got to give it to the Panthers on just their ability to just adjust, and even in certain parts of the game where Edmonton was really starting to use their speed through the neutral zone. But really, when it comes to these 2 contrasting styles of play, when the Panthers are more of that team that defends well on the rush, which there was a stat even in the beginning of the game where the Panthers were number 2 in rush chances against. Edmonton was number 1 in rush chances for. So, and of the 5 goals that Edmonton scored, basically only one was on a breakaway for them. Even though it was a quick rush for the first one, which had the D a little bit crossed up for Zach Hyman, but the one where Connor McDavid got it up to Zach Hyman, I mean, for the Panthers, just overall adjusting later on in the game and not allowing those odd man rushes for them. I mean, it's just really about adjusting games shift to shift for them throughout this one, and it really helped Sergei Bobrovsky later on in this one. I mean, the 5th one that the Edmonton Oilers scored was a little bit of a fluky one for them, but still the Panthers gave themselves an opportunity when in that 1 minute and 9 second period of the third, when it was just back and forth with them, and gave that opportunity for Carter Verhaeghe to give themselves a chance to win this game and to get the 2 points in regulation. That's the most important thing, because that could help them in tiebreakers later on down the line for them. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about our 3 stars of the game and the moment where we thought the game was won. We're going to discuss this and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments, just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with some serious perks. Now it's completely free to join. And earn valuable Built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. Redeem points for flights, hotel stays, and even further rent payments with over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program. The possibilities are endless. Access unique experiences that are exclusive to Built members. I love using points for travel, and Built makes it so easy to turn rent into rewards. If you're already paying rent, why not make it work for you? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonhl. That's joinbuilt.com/lockedonhl. Make sure to use our link so they know that we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. Also, today's episode is brought to you by SelectQuote. And the World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing, teamwork. And teamwork also protects your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's financial insurance agents are the perfect teammate when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. You invest so much to take care of yourself and to be the healthiest, best version of you. SelectQuote's exclusive policies can reward that effort. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonNHL. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Tuesday, where the Florida Panthers pick up a 6-5 regulation road win against the Edmonton Oilers. Now their road trip is at 2-2-0, right at 500. This is what we spoke about at the beginning of the road trip, is get around 500 for it, or put yourself in a position to get over 500. And it's a successful road trip for the Panthers, no matter how you draw it, even if things go sideways in Minnesota for them. But you salvage a lot of things here for the Panthers. You avoid a 3-game losing streak for them, and a lot of conversation about whether the Panthers need more goal scoring, what's going on with the goaltending, on untimely goals, on ones that they should save, which we can't deny that Spencer Knight and Sergei Bobrovsky have let in some squeakers in the last 2 games. But thankfully, the Panthers have at least on Monday night, found a way to win in Edmonton in their Stanley Cup Final Rematch. But let's go to our 3 stars of the game for this matchup between the two teams. Number 3, I'm going to give to Niko Mikkola. Took a penalty, got caught a few times in the neutral zone on some pinches. But when he faces the Oilers, he finds a way to score. It's safe to place a bet. Whenever you see Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers, place a bet on Mikkola. Just do yourself a favor when it comes to that. And you could do that all on FanDuel, even though that's not a sponsor until later in the show. But, get your bets in there for that next time the Panthers face the Edmonton Oilers. But he noticed that once again, Connor McDavid was coming up above the hashes before dishing it to Bennett, and then Verhaeghe for the game-winning goal, which, by the way, 5 of the 6 goals that the Panthers scored were at the hashes or below. So the Panthers getting to the net front, higher percentage shots through traffic. That's the formula for the Panthers. Anton Lundell, we spoke about for him, just where was he in the last game for the Panthers, and just lately, even when he was on that, even before he came up in the lineup with Barkov out, a few games where he just didn't get a single point, gets 2 primary assists, and that line of Reinhart, Luostarinen, and Lundell, Luostarinen, and Reinhart, they got outshot, but what matters is the goals for and goals against. That group altogether at 5-on-5, 2-0. So they got the job done, and a big primary assist to Niko Mikkola on that goal for Anton Lundell. And then number 1, Sam Reinhart. I got to give it to him. 20th goal of the season, outskilled, and just the skill that he had to take it to the goal line and then off the mask of Stuart Skinner, and then getting it to a +3 on the night for him. Defensive effort, top matchups for him, which the Draisaitl line was taking a lot of their draws against the Lundell line. McDavid was facing off against Bennett. McDavid facing off against his longtime teammate from Ontario in Sam Bennett, which they're going to be teammates in the 4 Nations coming up in February. So really, once again, interesting to see once again those two face off against each other. But those are the 3 stars of the game. But I want to take some time to also give a lot of praise to the 4th line for the Panthers. AJ Greer, no points, but presence was really felt with physicality. Went to the box with after a fight on a boarding call, but really got into the heads of the Edmonton Oilers. Really felt kind of a little bit of the sense of what it was like with these two facing off against each other. Broadcasted called it a rivalry. I don't really call it. I don't know. Facing once against in the Stanley Cup Final doesn't make it a rivalry in my opinion. But hey, to each their own. But for just getting a little bit of a sense of the bad blood that they had for one another when you go the distance in a series. AJ Greer wants that when seeing that the rest of the group got their cup rings, and then seeing in this road trip 3 guys from that team get Stanley Cup rings in Mahura, Montour, and then Ryan Lomberg recently. You don't think that the new guys on the Panthers are feeling that hunger as well? I mean, great game by him. Great game by Jonah Gadjovich, which is the moment where I thought the game was won, where Gadjovich lays a hit on Jeff Skinner, and then the Oilers are upset about the hit. They go after Gadjovich. Nosek gets involved. The linesmen get involved there with Adam Henrique as well there. Evan Bouchard doesn't have any support like we mentioned earlier, and then that leads to the Niko Mikkola goal for the Panthers. And that is where I said, not only did the Panthers tie the game, I mean, later on they took the lead even though they surrendered it. But that is where I felt that the Panthers were really, really in their heads in that game, where it was just the Edmonton Oilers were thinking that they didn't want to allow the Panthers to bully them, but it ended up in a mistake for them and just not helping their teammate out for them. And that fourth line, Corsi 4 of 80%. Not a lot of shots, total of 6 between shots for and shots against. But still, controlled play when necessary. And also, AJ Greer had a big stop towards the final quarter of the third period, where Connor McDavid had a beautiful setup to Zach Hyman, which Zach Hyman came back into the game with a shield, saw that the blood coming out of his nose, and then with an open net, AJ Greer is there to lay a back check and not give Zach Hyman an opportunity for a hat trick there. And that was a big stop for the Panthers at that time. And just once again, continuing to fill in as part of that identity, because when you win a Stanley Cup, chances are you're replacing a fourth line. But the evaluation that Bill Zito had in this offseason to identify guys who are going to be guys to fit. A lot of guys hadn't heard of Ryan Lomberg until he came to Florida. And then one of the first things that Bill Zito said was how much we were going to like this guy, giving him a deal for more than a year. AJ Greer is another one of those that you give a contract of more than 1 year, and he's fit in quite nicely. The stats don't say the whole story, but in a game like this, and you see a little bit of signs that if the Panthers go on another extended playoff run, that he could really be part of a checking line that's just going to keep the pucks in, going to help the Panthers get a change, especially if they have to go on the road where they don't have the last change when the draw happens. Those are the type of guys that you need, and gotta hand it to that fourth line. Also, there the Forsling goal. The fourth line was the one getting it deep to allow them to get that change. So a lot of things that when you look at everything all the things that the Panthers did right, when you write checks, you're thinking physicality, check, hits, check, special teams, 2 special teams goals to start the game, setting that tone right before the Panthers scored the rest at 5-on-5. So everything, it was just a complete game. And to think that the Panthers at one point fell behind 2, that's the crazy thing of it all for the Panthers and their ability to get this win for them. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to discuss more of this game and some of the random stat that we saw right before recording this show. And a win like today for the Panthers puts a little bit of the smoke out of a possible fire for them. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Here on a Tuesday, the Florida Panthers are coming off a 6-5 road regulation win against the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup Final Rematch. So a stat that we saw right before recording for this podcast, recapping this game, is the Edmonton Oilers were 62-0-1 in their last 63 home games when scoring 5 goals. In game number 64, they got regulation loss number 1. And the Florida Panthers got their first win of the season when trailing going into the third period. And to think that the Panthers, I didn't even mention this part. The Panthers went into that third period, 48 seconds on the power play, and it looked abysmal to start the third period. So, and once again, a lot of firsts this year for different guys. Jesper Boqvist tonight, Tomáš Nosek in early November getting his very first power play goal, his first career. And also the fact that they are 8-0 against teams that they faced in the postseason over the last 2 seasons. It's just goes to show that everything, the ups and downs, I want you guys, and it's going to be easier said than done. When the Panthers go through their share of downs, to embrace them. That's what I'm going to try to do, is because it gives teams an opportunity to learn. There was a quote last year that Barkov said, "You either win or you learn," throughout the regular season. And it's really something that this Florida Panthers team continues to carry, regardless of how their seasons end. Stanley Cup, first round exit, sweep. There's always some learning in losing. And even in our crossover with Nick, the fact that the Panthers have lost to eventual Stanley Cup champions in the Lightning in 2022, Vegas in the final, Edmonton has lost in the last 3 postseasons against the eventual champions. So the Panthers just taking the shutouts into perspective from before this game is something that the Panthers are just gonna find ways to wake up sometimes in certain matchups, and sometimes it's not always going to make sense. Just like how it doesn't make sense that the Panthers lose to the Blackhawks. And to think that Edmonton came in with a 5-game winning streak, Leon Draisaitl with multi-point games going into this one. When you put a Stanley Cup Final Rematch right there in front of you, you throw everything out the window. It's just like big rivalries in pro football and college football, like Florida State is one where you have to throw everything out the window. A Stanley Cup Final Rematch, you throw everything out the window. And we spoke about guys stepping up. Not only did guys step up, but according to Paul Maurice, he said that other guys were playing ill who logged big minutes. Aaron Ekblad, once again, 26 minutes. Gustav Forsling, 22 minutes. It's crazy. There's something about December and things going around in the locker room. I mean, flu season is here. Can't deny that. But there's just something about what happens in the Florida Panthers locker room that in this part of the year that there's always a person missing due to illness, and then it's spreading throughout, and guys continuing to fight through their bodies, knowing that this is a matchup that's very important to a lot of people. Win or lose, you made memories regardless of it. The agony of defeat, the joys of victory, all that. And we mentioned the physicality earlier for the Panthers. 5 guys with at least 4 more hits. Eetu Luostarinen had 6 of them. Just, you can't ask for anything better. And this win isn't necessarily season changing for the Panthers. You win this one and then you move on to the next. It's not really, I don't think it would be season changing unless it results in a big winning streak at the end of the year that carries them into a multi-point lead in the division, which the Panthers are still fighting for. But it's just a type of win that you just keep in the back of your head saying, we know we can compete against them. That's really what this speaks to. It's not a matter of showing them. You already showed them in June in the final. Yeah, it took some adversity. It took some looking in the mirror for them when it came to their structure and allowing so many breakaway opportunities at the time. But just continuing to stay still in your zone, not chasing checks, and knowing that if you force them to cycle, you're going to come out on the winning side. That's really, at least against this team, that the Panthers, once again, they know in the back of their head, it's one that they could keep up with for them. And this is, the Panthers have every right to feel themselves after a game like this. But they know that there's still things to fix with their even strength play. It's for them, it's really about just, and this was a game where they stuck with the same D pairs that they did in the most recent games. To think that even though they've experimented, even with losing 2 straight coming into this, they didn't try going after that move again. They kind of stuck with what they went to in the beginning of the season, because once again, you need time with your D partner. If there's any unit that needs time together, it's that part of the game. It's that part of their team. When it goes back to not allowing goals in your net and then winning, knowing that in the Stanley Cup playoffs, low scoring games, it might be boring. It's not the sexiest, but knowing that there's 3, 4, 5 guys who could get a timely goal. And this is why when a person like Matthew Tkachuk doesn't score 40 goals, you have someone else like Carter Verhaeghe step up, a Sam Reinhart. And even though Barkov will likely never get a 40-goal season statistically, we know that he has that ability to go on a scoring pace like that is of a 40-goal score. So the fact that there is structure and a level of comfort. They are comfortable in these situations. And yeah, it was high scoring. A 6-5 final. But once everything evens out, all this team needs to just consistently think about, once again, is the margins of being within a goal or ahead by a goal or tied. And mentally, things change in how they approach not forcing plays. And really, for the Panthers, this is something that is really helped them in the last season and a half, season and a quarter, excuse me. That has really helped them really continue to be comfortable in these. So that is really encouraging. And the Panthers once again have an opportunity to finish this road trip on a positive note in Minnesota on Wednesday night, a nationally televised game for the Panthers, which we will preview more on Wednesday's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. So make sure to come back here, as we will be bringing in Jacob Winans for another edition of the show. As we will preview that, we'll discuss more about what the Panthers quarter century team will probably be. We'll make our predictions, And there's another Panthers player who is possibly in trade rumors and doesn't make sense to trade them. We are going to discuss that more on the next edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. So come back then. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.